This dress may look like a very soft, floaty, light chiffon number, but in actual fact, it weighs nearly £3, which is quite a lot when you're dancing in it under stage lights. Let me take you closer and show you why. This dress was made for the finale number of Top Hat, and in actual fact, this is not the first dress that I made, and it's not anywhere near the first design that I drew either. But in the end, I'm really glad that what I had in mind initially and what I had planned and what I had made didn't work, and we had to pivot and use this dress instead. I think one of the biggest things that this dress taught me was that you have to be flexible. Top Hat, if you know, is an old musical. It's set in the 1930s, it's 1935 specifically. It has a lot of designer dresses in it. Alberto Bedini, the great designer, is making Dale a lot of dresses for the show. So the dresses do have a certain standard expected of them. And if you're working with a very small budget, you have to keep moving with that. And one of the other things is not just about budget, but it's also about your actresses. The girl who played Dale for this production, who is wonderful, did not suit 1930s. And we put her in every 1930s style that you could possibly imagine. And all of them, and she'll be the first to say it, just didn't work. They just looked kind of nothing on her. She didn't look bad, she just didn't look amazing. And obviously, for the finale number in Top Hat, she needed to look amazing. So we initially had planned to put her in a lot more of a 1930s wardrobe. All the costumes in the show were obviously as 1930s as we could get them on the budget that we had. So we were looking a lot at 1930s lines, which is obviously your longer lines, your panelled dresses. But also you have to look at the actress that you're working with, and putting someone in a 1930s dress that just doesn't suit the 1930s wasn't something that we wanted to do. So we had a conversation where we basically said, what's more important, this moment at the end of the show where they dance together to Let's Face the Music and Dance, and we get this dance number, or being historically accurate? And I think historically accurate went out the window because we wanted the moment instead, and that was more important. And sometimes it's okay to bend the rules a little bit because this is theatre, we're suspending reality anyway. So it's okay to kind of move with things. I do this a lot with my costumes. We'll use fabrics that wouldn't have been used in Victorian times for a Victorian costume, or we'll add things in that perhaps maybe colours and things that don't necessarily suit the era. But it's all about giving people a flavour of the era and allowing people to get lost in that world, as opposed to necessarily being historically accurate. There are times where historically accurate is very important, but I think in a musical, perhaps maybe not one of them. We need to look like the era, we need to have it feel like the era, but we don't need to hold on too tightly if it's going to jeopardize the whole look of the show. Of course, this is a dance costume, so it needed to have certain elements. For example, we wanted it to have a leotard base because there were lifts and things that she did, there were leg kicks that she did that would have shown her knickers, and we just didn't want that. So we wanted it to have a leotard base. Definitely not historically accurate. The leotard that we chose and the fabric that we chose actually has a fleck of holographic print foil on it, which obviously Lycra wouldn't have been available in the 30s either. But this fabric definitely wouldn't have been available in the 30s. It has this sort of holographic shine in it, and it's like what we call our ice shard Lycra, because we've used this on other things as well. And I love it because on stage, it kind of just looks white, but it doesn't look flat white. You know how sometimes Lycra can just look completely flat, and particularly when it's white, it can look a bit bland. So this gives it a bit of texture and gives it a bit of movement, because these holographic shards pick up the light and like fleck with the light and make it really just sparkle a bit and stand out a bit and not look too kind of flat on it. And so that was the leotard base that we used in this Lycra, and obviously that is a full leotard, so the skirt and everything is attached as if it is a dress, but she'll step into it completely. So it's not two pieces. It's not a skirt and a dress. It is one piece, but it does have that leotard base underneath it. So she has a lot more freedom. Oh, we're very off center. So she has a lot more freedom to be able to kick her leg and do lifts. Obviously, on top of the lycra is a lot of trim. So this is what we refer to as the hero dress. So it's like the big dress in the show that everyone's gonna, hopefully, the one that stands out. So it needed to have more than just a bit of sparkle. So there's a lot of trim added to this, and it's all hand sewn onto lycra, but it has to be sewn whilst the lycra is stretched. So it needs to be put on a mannequin or a board and sewn onto it whilst it's stretched. Otherwise, when you stretch it, it will take the stretch out of the fabric that's beneath it. Whereas if we hand sew it on whilst it's stretched, then it has a little bit of a give. This was sewn on so fast that I can literally, there's some like little ends that I have forgotten to sew because we had to do this dress so quickly because the first dress didn't work. And it was then a case of like, right, what are we going to do and how are we going to do this? Because we need a dress and we need a big dress and we need it to look fabulous. So this was really, really quickly sewn on. So I've just seen a couple of little ends that I need to snip. In fact, just ignore me. I'm just gonna snip the ends. Okay, we'll pretend they were already snipped. But because this is a dress and it's pulled on like a leotard, we had to put elastic in the skirt waistband so that it could be pulled on over her hips, and had to be very mindful when we were putting the trim onto that you leave some space. So one of the big things that I did to make sure that she had a bit more room was these flower motif on the back is actually poppered on. Again, something that they wouldn't have done in the 30s. But this comes off completely. So we have this whole band here that stretches. So when she's pulling it on, she's got a lot more room to work with. And then this trim piece can literally just go back on to the base. It was a relatively quick change, but it wasn't too bad. So it needed to be poppers, but it didn't need to be too quick. So that could go on there, because obviously this doesn't stretch either. The other thing is having a keyhole in the back. So this undoes with a hook and bar here so that there is a keyhole in the back. So when she's putting this on, she can pull it on with the keyhole completely and with that stretch in the back. And that does up with a popper there. And then we've got a hook and bar that brings the trim across the keyhole in the back so that she's got trim on her back as well, which looks a lot nicer when it's not on a white mannequin, because it's white on white at the moment, but when it's on skin, it looks a lot better. And then it comes to the skirt. Now, if you know the top hat look, it's big skirts. There's famous pictures of big skirts doing lots of things. So we knew we had to have a big skirt. So this is actually chiffon, multiple layers. There's a layer of chiffon and then another layer of chiffon. But obviously we didn't want it to be in any way sheer. So we have then a layer of white satin. That's like a brilliant white, which almost shines blue, but with that on top of it, we'll just lift this into a real white instead of it being sheer. It'll kind of pop it out into a real white color once it's underneath it. And then there's a couple of layers of underskirting as well, just to give it a little bit of extra lift. This is a circle, a full floor length circle. These are actually more than a circle. So these are in panels and are actually more than a circle. So we have a full kind of flare out with the skirt that will then move while she's dancing, because one of the most important things is movement of fabric when a dancer is dancing. So we need to make sure that at every opportunity that skirt is going, is spinning, is flicking out. And if she really spins, it will go really out, which it definitely did. But we need to make sure what we wanted was very much that. If you see any dancers of top hat, like the skirt really goes. And I didn't want to replicate the dress that they wear in a lot of the top hat musicals. I wanted to do our version of that dress. But one of the key things is that movement and really having that full quality fabric. She's supposed to be very rich or having very rich clothes bought for her. So it needs to like continue to move. So if you look at this, when it stops, the skirt keeps going. And that's kind of the most important thing about moving it. So that was a really key feature of this dress, of the Top Hat Hero dress. And obviously one of the things that makes it the most fun to wear, and that meant that the girl playing Dale did a lot of spinning. She's not been on stage for a while and she really does need a steam. She's very creased, but she is still absolutely beautiful. And one of my favourite costumes I've ever made. And yes, it might not be completely accurate to the 1930s, but it was completely perfect for that dance in that show. Every Thursday, I'm going to show you a different costume from our wardrobe collection. So make sure you come back next week and hit that subscribe button.